Are the poneglyphs literally alive? Do black blades have the souls of previous users inside of them? And are devil fruits just made from people? The true story of Ragnar that Oda revealed just changed everything that I knew about One Piece once again, kind of like with the haki weaving stuff, and maybe just straight up introduced a whole new power system also passively. Like, Ragnar is just my new best friend. It's a very one-sided relationship, of course, but we're kind of working on it. I just love this squirrel, not just because, fun fact, there are no natural squirrels in Japan. I found that out very recently, actually. That being said, though, I kind of have to admit I'm feeling a little bit betrayed here. Lied to. Spurned like an ex-lover even, because Ragnar is just not what I thought at all. Not even a little bit, really. You see, what I thought, and what probably I think you also thought, was that Ragnar was something that we have seen like 1,000 times before in One Piece. And by 1,000 times, I mean like 3 or 4 times. A hammer that turns into a giant squirrel. Like, clearly, this is gonna be another weapon or object that ate a devil fruit. We saw it all the way back during Alabasta the first time with Lasso the Cannon Dog. We saw it on Enies Lobby with Funk Freed, the sword who turns into a very cool elephant who would totally be a supreme grade blade, by the way, if literally anyone but Spandam actually got a hold of him. Bruh, forget Enel coming back to the story. I want Funk Free to come back and be like, I don't know, Luffy's Nika sword or something. So this must very clearly have been a hammer that was fed a legendary squirrel devil fruit, right? Albeit I will say it felt a little bit weird since that technology was supposedly developed by Vegapunk and Ragnar is way older than him, of course, but also Vegapunk is famously just restoring ancient lost technology. That's like more than half of his supposed inventions, as he himself admits, so it could just be some ancient, ancient kingdom, void century technology that Vegapunk rediscovered. But your rule's explanation of how Ragnar came to be, and I guess in extension also Oda's explanation, kind of shattered my entire expectations and also my understanding of the story overall. In fact, very fittingly, I kind of felt reading this like being hit by a very big hammer. Ouch, that actually hurt. Apparently, many centuries ago, Ratatoskr, the ice squirrel, was the faithful companion of Elbaf's legendary war god, who, coincidentally, seems to also be named Elbaf. I feel like we talked about this on the channel. And upon its death, its spirit then passed into its master's powerful hammer, Ragnar. And then, of course, Ragnar gained the power to turn back into a squirrel to guard his... Wait, what? Huh? Since when has that ever been a thing in One Piece, right? Dude, I'm already over here trying to figure out the entire abyss, and I think that Oda just gave us a whole new power system, how they gave Punch that little orangutan stuffed plushie. Oh my god, Punch is so cute. Or is this maybe something that we have seen in One Piece a ton of times already, but somehow didn't quite notice what it actually was? Because I do think that this reveal might just finally explain a ton of very weird things in the series that, haven't really been explained so far. We're talking black blades. We're talking poneglyphs. I'm even gonna talk devil fruits themselves. Let us cook. The kitchen is... Okay, let's just move on. I feel like cooking is like, that's like so 2025 anyways. And to kick things off, I kind of want to say that this doesn't feel exactly out of line with One Piece in general, because one of the central themes of the entire series is, of course, yes, inherited will. Luffy's inheriting the will of Roger and Joy Boy and Ace, who came before him, but this thing here, this would be literally inheriting the will of something on a whole new level where someone's will or spirit, or soul I guess, literally merges into an object after their death to live on in the future. Ragnar is very much inheriting the will of Ratatoskr by living on inside the hammer to be used then by Elbaf's next war gods. Now, as always with One Piece, it's gonna probably take a little bit before we really understand this concept completely, because Oda just kind of, in his classic fashion, likes to drip feed us crazy breaking info like that. But in the meantime, that means we get to do our favorite thing, theorize a bunch and get very weird with it. And since Ragnar is a weapon, let's start with weapons. We do see Ragnar as our clearest example of this concept of a spirit apparently just fusing with an object, but are there other weapons in the series that we can point to and say, oh, we've totally actually seen that concept before, and this makes a lot of sense? I would say yes, not even talking about Black Blades yet. We saw it very recently in Elbaf, Cerberus. Did you also think that it was very weird that they never actually confirmed a devil fruit name for this thing, right? At first I was kind of thinking all of the Holy Knights were just using that sweet, drooling, oily abyss power, but no, we got named devil fruits for Summers, for Gonko, for Killingham, so why not just say that Shamrocks used a sword that ate a Cerberus fruit, right? Well, because maybe that's just not how it works. And I think it's especially something we need to ask now that Ragnar has shown us this whole other type of soul, spirit infusion, that's even a thing that's possible, so perhaps the Cerberus sword was once just a faithful Cerberus that was owned by another Holy Knight, maybe a Figarland even, going back generations. And after it passed away, that loyal puppy stuck around, but in sword form. And ever since, that sword could have just been passed down through the Figarland family until Cerberus found its way into Shamrock's hands finally. Now, if we say that Cerberus could be another case of this Ragnar Ratatoskr situation here, then what about the other Figarland twin, right? Because Shanks, of course, also has a sword that's apparently very powerful, named after another mythological Greek creature, Griffin. As you probably know as a regular viewer, ever since Shamrock pulled out that Cerberus sword, I immediately have been wondering ever since if Shanks' sword was just in the same boat. Maybe Shanks has just been holding out on us. We've never actually seen him so much as break a sweat in any fight so far, so why would he need to unleash the real beast? If you're following the anime as well, which, one more month till that's back, but Toei even decided to animate a giant energy-like Griffin when he first attacked Kid arriving at Elbaf. And if the anime producers know something that we don't, that might very well be the case, at least for the directors, that very cool shot of his sword strike taking the shape of a griffin could even be a little bit of foreshadowing here. In other words, what I'm saying here is that, yes, could it be that there's also a literal griffin that fused into Shanks' sword? And if that's the case, when did Shanks have time to meet and befriend a mythological creature? I mean, it could have very well been given to him in Marijoa during his short stint as a Holy Knight right before he, peaced out for good, because to be fair, I mean, I really don't like Figarland Garling, but him and Shamrock, they really took him in. They were like so happy to have their son back, so maybe Garling was like, oh, here you go, my sons, you have the two mythical swords of our family that have been handed down for generations, right? And that's how Shanks got Griffon, because we just don't know. But there's actually one more possibility that I can see here, which actually brings me back to one of my favorite long-standing theories in One Piece. That frickin' egg on Roger's ships. This thing has been haunting my dream, haunting my omelets ever since I've been doing One Piece content, which, by the way, has been almost a crazy 8 years now, which is insane. I spent my entire 20s talking about One Piece, which is so cool, but also insane how much time has passed. Anyways, could the Roger Ack have hatched into a Griffon? Do Griffons even come from eggs? Where do Griffons come from? Do they just spawn? I don't know. Or a way sillier possibility even, maybe the egg hatched into an eagle, then that eagle ate a lion devil fruit, making it a Griffon, kind of like the how Stronger becomes a Pegasus, or the fake Pegasus in Skypiea from God, right, from Gonfall. and then that griffon, that eagle lion thing fused into a sword. I don't know, man. If Ratatoskr is a squirrel, they can probably make an eagle a griffin if they want. I mean, Oda likes changing things a little bit. After all, anything can happen in this wild, wacky One Piece world. What a fun alliteration. Now, the egg being an eagle could actually answer another very big question I've had lately, which is, where is that giant eagle? Now, for the 2 or 3 of you here who are not absolutely Norse mythology pilled, let me explain again. The World Tree Yggdrasil, which is of course the Atom Tree in Elbaf, you know it, you love it. At the top of it and at the bottom, you've got 2 longtime eternal enemies. Gnawing at the roots of the tree at the bottom is the Nidhogger, you know, which we now have confirmation is actually Loki's devil fruit. But up at the very top of it is its adversary, an unnamed giant eagle. And running up and down the tree as a messenger, sending insults from one to the other, is Ratatoskr, which we now know is the spirit that went into Ragnar. So One Piece has now officially confirmed the Nidhogg dragon and Ratatoskr the squirrel, but that means we are still missing one massive component of this Norse mythology trio. Where is the eagle? Well, we still haven't really seen anything about the Heaven Realm. We have no idea what's up at the top of the Atom Tree. I'm still holding out my copium and praying for some elves in One Piece, but it could be very neat if the giant eagle that's supposed to be up there was actually stolen, or let's say borrowed politely, by the Roger Pirates. Because I think we can all agree that this egg just has to be important, please, right? Somehow, or I'm actually gonna lose my mind if there is never gonna be any payoff for this thing specifically. And then it maybe hatched, and the baby eagle made friends with baby Shanks, they became besties, and at some point, the eagle just decided to live inside Shanks' sword. Funnily enough, this would actually help make Loki's massive beef with Shanks actually make a lot more sense. I mean, I guess there's also the entire catching him and imprisoning him for many years thing. I can kind of understand why Loki would be a little bit salty about being chained to a tree for, you know, like over 6 years. I would hold a little bit of a grudge there too. It would be very funny if part of Loki's hatred for Shanks is because Loki has the Nidhogg fruit and Shanks' sword contains the soul of Nidhogg's enemy number 1, the giant eagle. But as I already said, I don't think that these Figarland special swords here are the only possibilities for weapons that have also been infused by something spirit. In fact, there might just be a lot of weapons with souls inside of them, because what if this is how black blades are actually made? Alright, so for many years, I've kind of just assumed that black blades, like everyone else in the community probably too, are made when someone puts so much awesome, great armament haki into a sword that at some point, the haki just stays there permanently, turning the blade black, like the black haki that we see on armaments. And to be fair, that seems what kind of Oda has been implying for a long time, especially since black is the color used to depict something when, you know, you pour armament into it. So, you know, when Zoro puts armament haki into a sword, it kind of turns black. But firstly, it's kind of unclear whether that black color is actually visible to, you know, everyone in the One Piece world, or if this is more a visualization for us readers. And let's also not forget that Ragnar does appear to be a black hammer. Coincidence? I think not. But what if it's more than just that? After all, there are only 2 blades so far in the entire story that are confirmed to have the black blade status. So are you telling me that Mihawk and Ryuma, like hundreds of years ago, are the only characters that have enough haki in One Piece to turn their blades black? Because Kozuki Oden's Enma had a ton of haki in there too. It almost drained Zoro, and he had to use his own haki in order to take control of the blade. And yet somehow, despite Oden's haki being permanently in there very clearly, Enma is not a black blade. Despite Oden being one of the all-time greatest swordsmen in One Piece history, powerful enough with his haki to wound someone like Kaido. So you'd kind of like to think that if a bunch of advanced armament and advanced Conqueror's haki was the only qualifier for creating a black blade, we'd have seen a lot more than just 2 so far. So let's look at these 2 black blades that we do know about for some more clues. First up, we have Shusui, the sword once wielded by Ryuma, a national treasure of Wano. Now remember, when zombie Ryuma gave Shusui to Zoro, he spoke about how Shusui would like nothing better than for Zoro to be its new master. Ryuma spoke about that sword as if it had a will of its own. So while Ryuma's body was zombified with Brook's shadow, was his soul actually in the sword all along and just fused with it upon his own death, permanently imbuing his will and spirit into that sword and thus turning it black? Now obviously this is very different than combining with it and then the weapon can transform back into the literal person. That would be hilarious though if like, you know, Shusui just randomly turn into, I guess, like Ryuma. But the idea still of someone's spirit infusing with the weapon and pouring all of their experience and power into it is actually crazily close to the entire Ragnar idea, I think. So could the same be true of Yoru, right? That's the other one, wielded by someone who's still alive. Mihawk, of course, speaks of Yoru so highly. When he first fights Zoro, after using the small knife, he gives the finishing blow with Yoru, talking as if Zoro has earned a privilege of being cut down by this black blade. I think it's fair to say that Mihawk treats his sword with such respect and adoration, it's almost like another person. He'll only use his blades in truly worthy battles, so could this actually be part of Yoru's own will? It's kind of crazy that at this point we still know pretty much nothing about Mihawk's actual backstory, so could Yoru have actually belonged to someone close to Mihawk, his master or mentor, whose spirit is now in the sword and whose legacy is now being carried on by the world's greatest swordsman? And that actually leads me down to an even crazier idea, but one that I think is very cool. What if Zoro is going to turn the Wado Ichimonji into a black blade as well? I mean, it already kind of feels like he's going to do that at some point in the story anyways. I think we can agree it's his most important sword. It's definitely set up as part of his crazy journey to become the world's greatest swordsman. I would argue for most of us, making your own black blade at some point feels like a somewhat prerequisite for earning that title properly. But unlike Ryuma, who might have died and put his own soul into the sword, Zoro wouldn't turn the Wado Ichimonji with his own soul, but with the soul that's already in the sword, Sanji. No, I'm just kidding. It's of course Kuina. What if after her death, Kuina's soul bonded or fused with the Wado Ichimonji? I mean, her dream could have been so strong and her will and, you know, promise with Zoro that they made for one of them to become the strongest, that her literal will and spirit lived on within the sword itself so that she could continue alongside her friend and partner. But Manu, then why isn't the Wado Ichimonji a black blade yet? Very good question. Because the soul being in there is probably not the only step necessary, right? Maybe there also needs to be some kind of fulfillment and an actual like skill level and ability that you need to reach to actually unlock that potential. Zoro inherited Kuina's will and dream, their shared dream to become the world's greatest swordsman, so maybe if Zoro actually accomplishes that dream, Kuina's spirit will manifest and turn the blade black. Kind of, you know how devil fruits are said to only be able to awaken if you actually align your will perfectly with that of the fruit? Maybe that's the exact same thing for swords. You need to actually align and reach the full potential of the sword before you can actually unlock that. Now, don't get me wrong, it would be kind of cheesy, but low-key, it kind of sounds very cool and would fill in that missing piece of how a black blade is actually made, because it just must be more than just armament haki or conqueror's haki that turns a blade black, at least in my opinion, and it would just be such an emotional and cool connection to Zoro's past and his entire crazy backstory. Again, with just a sample size of 2, we don't exactly have a ton of examples to work with here, but this entire Ratatoskr fusing with Ragnar idea just makes so much sense to me if we apply the same concept to other weapons as well. Again, maybe that could even explain the reason that Enma isn't black despite being imbued with Odin's haki, because it does have Odin's will or spirit inside of it, but his dream of opening Wano's borders has not been fulfilled yet, and it's also not going to be fulfilled by Zoro. So maybe once Momonosuke actually opens up Wano, Enma, but much more likely the Ame no Habakiri, Oden's other sword that's now in Momo's possession, will actually turn into black blades instead. And actually, while we're on the train, this might also just straight up explain a lot about cursed blades in general too. Like, why does Cavendish's cursed sword make him possessed by Hakuba when he falls asleep? Because there's just a whole other guy in there. It kind of makes you wonder what other sorts of weapons have guys in them. And maybe that massive crazy sword on Elbaf has the spirit of Elbaf, not the island, but the war god that we have actually crazily enough gotten confirmation for this last chapter himself as well. Maybe the giant sword in Onigashima has the spirit of whatever that big skull belonged to. Now, those would be some truly big guys, but you know who the biggest guys in the One Piece world truly are? That's right. It's my Patreons who make this channel possible and mean the world to me. Thank you. I truly can't say how much you guys mean to me. It's just so good. If you enjoy the channel, check the Patreon out. I've got a bunch of free content if you don't want or don't have money to support. And if you do want to throw a couple of bucks here and, you know, help us make better content, you can help me pay my amazing artists and have the art and, you know, help us edit even better. And in addition, also get a bunch of other really cool bonus content, behind the scenes, weekend updates, and a newsletter as well. So yeah, if you want to support the channel, that would be absolutely fantastic. But now, with the bills paid, back to the video. And just to very quickly wrap up the entire weapons and swords idea here, I thought it was always very interesting that Oda specifically was drawing faces, like what the swords of certain One Piece characters like Zoro's would look like if they had faces. Seems to me like that could be a sneaky piece of foreshadowing from the SBS, which we know that Oda just loves to do. That being said though, I don't think that weapons might be the only things where this idea of spirit infusion could actually work as well. Because back when I first learned about Joy Boy's haki knot on Egghead and the fact that he could embed his willpower into that rope or knot and preserve it for Emmet for centuries, turning his haki into a physical object, which I immediately speculated, of course, back then, that Joy Boy might have done that very same thing with the Straw Hat, probably the same one that Imo has frozen in Marijoa, especially because, you know, we love the idea on this channel that Bing Sake is actually Joy Boy's story, and we talk specifically about his hometown being the weaving town or the spinning town. Spinning haki into objects seems like a very Joy Boy thing to do with everything that we've learned about him. Now, what's actually really interesting is that I think sometimes the community tends to forget that haki is quite literally the Japanese word for willpower. The word actually has so many more meanings. There's, for example, the translation ambition, which is where the like kingly ambition comes from with Conqueror's haki. There's also the translation vigor and drive. But the most important and most common translation of haki in Japanese is spirit. That is the main translation. Now, this is not necessarily like a ghost spirit, but in the sense of someone's fighting spirit or ambitious spirit, right? Haki isn't just a big store of energy, it's a literal physical embodiment of someone's will. So putting your haki into an object in Japanese, I don't think just means you're putting your power into it. You're actually quite literally putting yourself, who you are as a person, into it as well. So Joy Boy himself might be stored inside that hat. Could he ever actually then get out of that form too? Who knows? Maybe Luffy can put him on and it'll be like a Cappy from Super Mario Odyssey situation. Wait a second. Super Mario Odyssey? One Piece Odyssey? Homer's Odyssey? It all lines up. We cracked One Piece, guys. Anyways, when Joy Boy knew that he was gonna lose the war, he might have just actually preserved himself and his own spirit and soul for the future, just like he ensured the ancient weapons and poneglyphs were preserved as well. And speaking of the poneglyphs, could these things also have Joy Boy in them or other allies of his? Because Roger can hear the poneglyphs. Using the very mysterious power known as the voice of all things, he could hear them in a sense, understand their meaning, even if he couldn't literally translate the glyphs. And I could be forgetting something here, but I'm pretty sure that the poneglyphs are the only inanimate object that we've seen people hear or understand with the voice of all things. I don't think that Roger could hear them to the extent that he could literally read and decipher their messages fully. He had Kozuki Oden to help with that, but he does seem to kind of get a general vibe and understanding of their importance and the ability to find sense and the ability to kind of sense their location to an extent. I mean, that's why Big Mom wanted Pudding after all, and why Blackbeard has kidnapped Pudding, because the Three-Eye tribe is supposedly the only race with the innate ability to use the voice of all things, though Pudding herself has apparently yet to awaken that skill fully. But Big Mom's entire plan, and now Blackbeard's plan, seems to be to use that ability to analyze the road poneglyphs and find Laugh-Tale that way. So I think it's totally possible that if not the hat, or in addition to the hat, Joy Boy might have actually split his own soul, kind of like Horcrux style, amongst the poneglyphs. And this would totally actually contrast in a very cool way with Emu, who seems to be splitting their power amongst all the people that they've formed the pact with. Both of them might have just split their souls, but one did it so to preserve for the future, and the other to, you know, just kind of oppress the entire world. Now, of course, maybe Joy Boy didn't split his own soul between all of them. Maybe he and some other followers all put themselves into the poneglyphs, fusing their spirits with them upon their deaths so that they could pass their messages along into the future. For all I know, it could just be one person per poneglyph, and it also still lines up with the Ragnar idea because they had so much faith and hope put into their messages of the poneglyphs that their literal souls and spirits were able to live on in them after their death. Now, this takes things a little bit further, but it would be truly wild if at some point the poneglyphs actually transformed back into people somehow, and maybe the text of the poneglyphs are actually only part of the message. Maybe you actually have to go deeper and actually listen to the rest of what's kind of in the message using the voice of all things to truly get the full message of each poneglyph. It would be a very unfair thing to Robin, but I think it's a possibility, and we have Luffy with the voice of all things, so we're kind of covered. Also, I was just thinking about this while we were talking about the voice of all things and poneglyphs. What are the other things that we know you can hear with the voice of all things? Specifically, these ancient giant beasts like Zunisha and the Sea Kings. I've speculated about this like 1 or 2 years ago in a video talking about Joy Boy's crew, and the idea that maybe Zunisha and Emeth and, you know, the Sea Kings, could they have been regular people who got turned into giant animals and can't leave that form? Well, the spirit fusing makes it possible, I think. Is that what we actually see with the Forbidden Sun and like these like sun star fragments that they put up? Is that like a way to actually transform, like put yourself into another thing? That would be kind of crazy. Like actually taking someone's spirit, using the Forbidden Sun and putting it into like an inanimate object, like a hammer, or like maybe like someone like Moria built like some crazy giant, like someone built Zunisha and just infused them with like some guy. Would be pretty cool, honestly. Especially since Zunisha and the Sea Kings just seem like people. They have like the same level of intelligence and knowledge and just, you know, like, what's the right word? You know what I mean. They're like absolutely human. So I think that could actually work for them as well. But I think we can take this even further than, again, just fusing with weapons and other inanimate objects. Could souls fuse with people? Like, for years, people have wondered about Blackbeard having multiple personalities or souls inside of him, so could Sebek or even his mother Iris could somehow imbue their own will into their son to the point where their spirits are literally mingling inside of him? Maybe this is even connected to how Emo's possession works too. They're able to put part of their own soul inside their covenant holders and then thus influence or take control of their bodies and minds. And now that I think about it, is that just how devil fruits work? I mean, at least in the case of mythical zones, it really seems like Nidhogg and Nika and other creatures that have devil fruits literally existed during the first world in some way, shape, or form. I mean, the existence of these fruits very much feel like they imply some real-life creature being from ancient times that these fruits were actually based on. and then kind of like just recreated their powers. So are all these things just inspired by mythology of things like the Phoenix or the Buddha, or are these actually the wills of powerful mythical creatures that at some point lived and breathed in the world, right? Passed down in the form now of devil fruits. Are devil fruits inherited will? I mean, we talked about this idea before, but it just makes so much more sense with this entire spirit fusion thing. I mean, let's partner with the idea that devil fruits seem to just have a will of their own, and right, like the Nika fruit kind of choosing Luffy, and it does feel like these beings may have actually just fused their own spirits with devil fruits in order to pass their own powers and their own ambitions, haki, down to future people. Let's just take the Nika fruit, for example. The way that the Gorosei say that it's been eluding the government for centuries kind of makes it feel like it somehow managed to actively avoid capture somehow and not being eaten by the wrong people. And again, it kind of felt like it chose Luffy, who was very clearly not the person supposed to eat it. If you know, my running theory is that Shanks was looking for Ace, the person who Roger kind of bred to be the next Joy Boy. But instead, Luffy happened to find it specifically and eat it. The guy who, looks just exactly like Joy Boy apparently, always acting the same way as Roger, and has the same hidden dream as Roger and all. It's kind of like the fruit knew that it had to be eaten by Luffy and could only be awakened by him specifically. To me, it very much feels like it's not just a fruit that grants those powers, but Nika's literal spirit inside the fruit. The devil inside the fruit, as we get explained in Enies Lobby, that's like an actual thing living in the fruit. This is even more evident, I think, by how awakening the fruit with Gear 5 actually affects Luffy's thoughts and personality and how he stops being just Luffy. It causes him to laugh uncontrollably, seemingly being taken over to a certain degree by Nika himself. So it could just totally be the case, I think, that when people eat devil fruits, they literally fuse with some being, some devil, to gain and share their powers. It could also fit again with the idea from Enies Lobby and the CP9 members talking about what happens when you eat 2 devil fruits and the 2 different devils inside those fruits fighting it out and you dying in the process. And we already know that a devil fruit awakening only works when the user and the spirit of the fruit are actually perfectly aligned. Otherwise, you just basically go jailer beast mode where the fruit itself takes over your consciousness. This basically tells us that fruits do have wills of their own. It probably also works for zones in general. I have no idea how this applies to Paramecius or Logias, but I definitely think it's a possibility that the spirit of the actual historical Nika lives within that fruit, lived within Joy Boy, and now keeps living on within Luffy, influencing his personality. Because, like, again, another theory we had on this channel a long while ago, but I kind of talked about how it's weird how people eating certain devil fruits take on the characteristics of people who had that fruit before them. Just a fun list of examples. We know that Khalifa, after eating the soap fruit, suddenly gets very goofy, which doesn't fit her personality at all. Kaku kind of changes. We know that Big Mom is like this cute, sweet little kid and girl, but when she eats Mother Caramel and her fruit, she turns basically into the image of Mother Caramel. Like, so much more of Mother Caramel's personality suddenly is part of Big Mom's character here. We know that both Bartolomeo and Mr. Bonclay are actually pretty nice people who are fans of Luffy's and are pretty great bros, but they do evil things, and we later found out that before them, the two, Higurashi and like the other Kurozumis had those fruits, being very evil and scheming people. My point being, could it just be that eating a devil fruit kind of bestows a certain personality and characteristic onto you as a person, and has Luffy, just because he ate that fruit so early in his life, just changed personality since he's eaten that fruit? Because when you think back to chapter 1 of the story, Luffy is this kind of whiny, grumpy kid, right? Not very Luffy-like at all. Only after eating the devil fruit, he gets very cheerful, full of laughter, kind of like, let's go, is like, whatever happens, I don't really care. It's like a very interesting and stark shift in personality that happens in chapter 1 before and after eating that fruit. But besides just being inside of poneglyphs or a hat, or dare I say even a devil fruit, there's also so much more we can talk about with Joy Boy, which is why you should check out all my thoughts on the last Nika fruit user in this video right here, we go into a lot of detail. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Thanks to our fantastic Patreon members. I have a very good big video on the live action coming up on Thursday. Don't miss that before it drops next week. And I will see you hopefully in that video here or the next one.